There was nothing like Hollywood. There was nothing like having your customer come in and they're meeting Tom Cruise or they're meeting all these celebrities. It was a lot of fun. You know, the kid from Havertown was at the Academy Awards.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark Howley.
The Mark Howley Show.
How did you do it and why?
Hey, this is Mark from the Mark Howley Show, and welcome back to everybody. Just got back from a month in both Scotland and Ireland, so Dennis and I share a common heritage, and I think I'm all fired up for the Scotch and the Irish. And but anyway, Dennis is a great guest, and he served as the worldwide president of Paramount Home Entertainment. Prior to that, did 25 years with Disney Home Entertainment, and he also has a lot else going on in his life, not to mention he's a father of 4 girls, so that in itself is hard work. So anyway, Dennis, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Mark.
Yeah,
great to see you.
Well, good to have you on. So, you know, I think the most important question, or one of the most intriguing questions, is all the years you spent in the home entertainment business. And what, in general, what was your experience there? I mean, you know, tell us a little bit about, you know, the Disney and then moving over to Paramount, and you know, let's just play around with that some.
Sure. You know, well, as you know, because we're the same grade, I got out of school in 1982.
Yep.
And I went looking, well, truth be told, I went right back to the caddy house at Marion and got a job bartending at McSorley's.
That's good. That's good. Oh, no, remember McSorley's? Nice place. Nice place to.
I had a great summer, and September came around, and my mother said, "So what do you're going to need to get a job?" And I thought, I got money in my pocket. I'm playing golf every Monday.
Yeah.
What do I need a job for?
I'm rich, man. I'm rich.
But, you know, I set out right then I thought I had a business and finance degree. I always felt that sales would be something I could do, mostly because it seemed like it was just talking to people.
Yeah.
So I thought, yeah, I'm qualified.
I can do that, yeah.
So, you know, I went and looked for, I remember distinctly, went to the supermarket. I looked down, I wrote down every consumer product company I could think of, from Stouffer's to Pepperidge Farm to Coca-Cola to Duracell battery. And I interviewed all fall long to get a job, and struck out everywhere, essentially.
Yeah, just begging, please give me work. Somebody give me a paycheck.
And I guess it was November of that year, I got a call. I must have applied to a blind ad. And I got a call from this company called the Walt Disney Company.
Well, they're well known.
And they said that they had a job selling video cassettes. And I was like, okay, does it come with a car? And they said, yes. I said,
paycheck?
Sign me up.
How about
then.
a paycheck?
I didn't even care about the paycheck. I was thumbing it everywhere throughout Havertown, and the car was enough for me, but it did come with a paycheck too. But as you probably remember, as a kid, if you were never out of Havertown, Walt Disney World was something in the distance. You never heard of it. I mean. And by that time, Disney had been off the air since 1967. He passed in 67. So I really didn't know what Disney was. I didn't know what video cassettes were. But as I said, it came with a car, and I took the job. So,
hey, yeah, you know, when you're young, it's like any of us, you know, grab a job, get in the game, man. Somehow get in the game.
Absolutely. So I started with Disney in 82. I had the Northeast part of the country. And my job was to go find video stores.
All right.
Because at the time, you know, video stores were popping up.
Yeah.
Hollywood had a love-hate relationship with video, because back then, the video business started the porn business in the 70s.
Isn't that nice to know?
Yeah. So, you know, no longer did you need 35 millimeter cameras. You just had a video cam. You went out to the San Bernardino Valley or rented a house. So, you know, again, I found this all out later. But I took the job. I went out. They didn't know who was buying video cassettes. So I was about the 4th individual hired at Disney Home Video.
Really?
And my job was to go find out who were these video stores? Who were they? And I essentially I had a trunk full of Mickey Mouse dolls and Mickey Mouse ties and watches and posters, and I went
the ears, the whole thing.
I would go up to Boston, I'd go to Richmond, I'd spend the whole week driving around looking at video stores and going to talk to somebody about video.
I know the drill.
I knew the better I did, the more likely they would move me towards home office. And in I guess they moved me to Chicago.
I remember that.
91.
I remember that. Yep. I remember
Right.
you going to Chicago.
91, they moved me to Los Angeles. And,
Wow.
Candidly, I was there before Disney had the resurgence. You might remember the names Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg.
Yep.
They came in 1984. I was there in 82. So essentially, I had this front row seat to this unbelievable company that was just about to take off. And sure enough, it did take off over the next 30 years. It grew tenfold, and I was right there hanging on, having a great time.
As it's growing like that, and you're a new guy, I presume you're doing well, I know you were, that you're shuffling up the ladder some.
Correct. I had a few, not necessarily setbacks, but I got to hire a guy or help hire a guy in probably 1983. It was one of my first lessons in life that I hired this guy out of Boston, and great guy. He was in the potato chip business.
There we go. All right.
And he would go out to stores and he would tell me all about how he used to bring a razor blade with him and cut the bags on his competitor chips.
Nice. Good work.
So
Good work.
Those chips, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But this guy, he was about 10 years older than me. He had 3 kids at the time. I was still in, Philadelphia, goofing off with my company car. And really soon after that, this guy became my equal.
Okay.
And next thing I know, he became my boss.
Oh, shit.
And it was my first lesson in the world. I hadn't moved anywhere it hit me. I thought, this guy wasn't even a college grad.
Yep.
I always looked at him like, hey, I'm in college. I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Sure enough, he had my job, and it was my first lesson in the business world, which is intelligence is one thing. But if you can couple that with hard work, boy, what a success that was. Combine smartness with a little hard work, and it'll take you somewhere. So, at that point, I kind of committed. I was getting married at the time.
Yep.
I stopped goofing off a little bit. I started getting up in the morning as opposed to sleeping
Shocking.
in.
That alarm clock. Damn.
Well, when your company's on the West Coast and you're in Philadelphia, you had until about 10 or 11 in the morning to get to the office.
Time it perfectly. Yeah.
But sure enough, once I did that, I got to Chicago. I committed myself to work. I went from area sales rep to district manager to regional manager to vice president and so on and so forth. So I kept on advancing the harder I worked.
Yeah.
Ironic that way.
But I mean, you have to deal with a lot of I think a lot of us in a career, because you and I, we had similar ones in just selling, and I always say shaking hands and kissing ass, and within a company and without of a company. But did you run into any, let's say, like bosses that were really hard, like people who just you couldn't quite figure them out, and somehow or another you had to get around it or through it or whatever it might be?
Well, I mean, my first few bosses, I was personable enough and smart enough to outsmart them at every turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally got a boss, a guy out of New York City with an MBA, and he wouldn't let me BS him. He recognized that I was shuffling and jiving and keeping people off balance. And so I remember I met him in Newark Airport. Now, at the time, I've moved back home. I'm trying to save some money because I'm getting married. I'm living at my house in Havertown.
Yep,
And
I remember.
I have my office is in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother would see me go out, Thursday night happy hours, anytime
sure.
during the week. And I'd go crawling down to my office at about 10:30 in the morning. And so anyway, this guy recognized that. He sits me down at Newark Airport, and he said, he gave me a review. Probably the first time I had a review. I was probably 25 years old. And he took me out. He pointed out everything I wasn't doing. And, I knew it, but I was still mad. And I got in the car and I headed back to Philadelphia, and I got back into my house, and my nice little old Irish mother was there, and she knew I was upset, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Look at this review this guy gave me."
Yeah.
I said, You believe this?
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said, "I think he's asking you to do your job."
Stop it.
Well, so I didn't talk to my mother for a
Yeah.
week. I said, "The hell with
Knock
that."
her out. Knock her out. You got. You know what you got to do? You got to find a guy at the bar. You got to talk with him.
He'd agree with me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But it was one of the first moments in my life where I thought, wow, my mother wasn't educated, but she had watched me be a goof off.
Yeah.
And I was always smart enough and personable enough to push bosses around. But I met a guy, I met my match. He didn't take it. And, he was a tough one to get past.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a few others in my career too. But, more times than not, the toughest bosses were the ones that were holding me accountable.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I was okay with that.
And once you hit a certain level of maturity, I think being held accountable is good because you're like, okay, I can do this. Go ahead, watch me. I can play the game. Where did you pick up your education?
Well, I guess probably I got transferred to Chicago. I'm 28. We moved to Chicago. My wife and I had the Midwest territory. I had managed 5 different individuals: Minnesota, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, 2 in Chicago. And I thought to myself, these guys were all 5, 6 years older than me. I
Yeah.
had never managed before. And the one thing about Disney is they did support you in a variety of ways. So I took it upon myself to go to remember those AMA management
Yeah, I did a
classes?
few of them.
I was a nut with them. I went to every one I could possibly go to try to understand, because I had innate ability to sell.
Yeah,
I always considered myself in high school. I told this my whole life. People said, "Well, did you get along with people in high school?" I said, "Yeah, I got along with the kids that were really smart, and I got along with the kids that they were in the zoo."
Oh yeah, I like the zoo. The zoo was the 4th section, by the way, in our high school. That's a very, very complimentary term. Yeah, you're in the zoo. But I do remember you in high school being very comfortable socially, and we knew each other. You ran in a
Sure.
slightly different crowd, but it never mattered. It didn't matter. I didn't
No.
care. So
No.
anyway, now you're off to AMA classes, and you're starting to refine your skill set.
Right.
And that was a big help to you. Now
Absolutely.
you eventually moved to California. Now that I remember that, and that's a big move. I mean, all the way across,
Yeah.
new culture, and you must have been a little bit awestruck by it. I mean, you're saying you're bumping into these people that are pretty high powered dudes and gals, I guess.
Yeah, it was remarkable. It wasn't hard leaving Chicago, although I loved Chicago. It was a lot of fun. And at every move I took, I always thought I'd go back to Philadelphia. I thought, okay, this will just be, a trip out there. We'll see what happens. So I get to California in 91, and our business is thriving at that point. It was right prior to. It was right when the animation business was resurging. Little Mermaid was coming. Aladdin was coming.
Yeah.
And my career was awesome because I kind of started with little mom and pop stores. And then I went to, because we were trying to develop the business, we started to open up bigger stores. Blockbuster became a big thing
They were
during
huge.
that time
They
frame.
were huge.
We were Disney, so we sold product that people wanted to own. So we wanted to get into grocery stores. And next thing I know, I'm in Bentonville, Arkansas, calling on Walmart.
Wow.
So yeah, I had this great career and I met a lot of people, but there was nothing like Hollywood. There was nothing like, being in a crowd with, having your customer come in and they're meeting Tom Cruise or they're meeting, all these celebrities. That was, it was a lot of fun. The kid from Havertown was at the Academy Awards.
Were you really?
Yeah.
Cool.
There was always things like that. And, you'd run into, I met a lot of celebrities. I never got enamored by them, although I met Mickey Mantle and I got enamored by him. So that changed everything.
Mickey Mantle. Come on, he moves up the ladder. Although he's a Yankee, that's one problem. Hey, not been a Yankee. But anyways, I mean, as you're meeting these people, I mean, at the moment you have to be a little bit awestruck. I mean, somebody that is so well known on the TV screens and movie screens. I mean, did you find that difficult for you? Just you have a good personality, but still, that's a pretty, that's a tough one to absorb when you're a younger guy.
Yeah, no doubt. And candidly, I wasn't good with what we call talent. Talent wants to be treated in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I kind of treat everyone the same way.
Yeah, I don't like that.
They don't like that. They're like, hey, what are you treating that guy over there like me for? So I was, as I said, I was never good with talent. I tried, I always got my publicity people to deal with talent. They always wanted me to go talk to them, but I was never real comfortable chatting with them, only because they to me, they didn't seem like real people. Although occasionally you did run into people that were just, awesome and down to earth type individuals. But yeah, it was a little, it's still the same way in Los Angeles. You could go out on the west side of LA and run into celebrities. It's kind of it's an odd thing. You wouldn't believe it if you live back east, but out here, they're out and about. They're, on the street with you. So, some of them are real people. Others are a little bit crazy, but I was never great at dealing with talent.
You're working with Disney for 25 years.
Right.
I mean, that's a career within itself. And now you got up to the point where you're basically running that thing, weren't you? Damn near running it.
Well, I was the one thing they do in Hollywood is, and you'll appreciate this. You do get to run a division. They throw out titles pretty haphazardly. So you became president. I became president of certain, I guess, at Disney and the International Home Entertainment. It was my first president job. You have a head of finance. You kind of always imagine it like a basketball team. There were 5 key parts of any organization. Sales, marketing, ops, and then you had finance and you had legal or HR happened to be. So I, in the organizations in these big media companies, what they do is they take the head of finance and the head of legal, and they actually report into the legal and financial structure of the overall company as opposed to the division. They dotted line to you, but so the truth is you had a title called president, but you were kind of president of sales and marketing. They were big jobs. I mean, there's no doubt. When I took over international, it was $1 billion a year business. There was 500 people across the globe that worked for you. They were really big jobs. And
let me ask you a question. I mean, I ran a business, the same thing, 4 or 5 guys, but it was a pretty small business and kept it, just kept it tight. But now you have 500 people. So how many people do you have reporting to you specifically as to what's going on with those 500? Do you have 10 guys coming up and giving you reports, or
somewhere between 5 and 10? You had finance, you had marketing, you had legal.
My question is more to the sales group, because you're a sales guy. So there's these 10 people, or what, I don't know how many managers are coming in and talking to you. That must be an ungodly amount of reports coming in, or I can't imagine the size of that.
Well, there were 2 things. Number one, you had, especially in international, you had a general manager of every country.
Yeah.
And that general manager had sales and marketing reporting to them. We had a structure where we had a regional manager. So I had a guy who oversaw Europe.
Okay.
I had someone who oversaw Asia Pacific.
Yep.
And then also someone who oversaw Latin America.
Okay.
And so you kind of get into a rhythm in that when you're managing international out of Los Angeles, is first thing in the morning is Europe.
Yep.
Midday is Latin America.
Yep.
And at the end of your day, you had Asia to deal with.
Yep. That's what we did. We sent I remember sending our quote requests out at like 5:00 p.m. To Asia. And then the next morning when you come in, they're all there. So you start wrapping your life into these time zones. But you're called upon to get out there and travel in those areas.
Yeah. With international, I would go out once a month.
Okay.
International sales was a challenge, and it took me a while to figure it out, because you didn't have the ability to call a buyer. I mean, number one, you was on a different time frame, and number 2, they spoke a language that you didn't speak.
What the hell are you saying? What the hell?
So you really kind of. I went to a guy that one of my best bosses through the years. Who was known for his international management. I went to him, I said, I don't understand this. How are you able to make decisions? Let's say we're pricing Little Mermaid in France. And he said to me, how many times have you been in France? I said, once. He goes, how do you know what the cost should be there? He said, here's the deal. In international management, you have to set parameters and stop train wrecks.
Yep.
So in other words, you have to hire people that you trust and allow them to do their jobs.
Yes.
And it was a moment in my career where I was like, oh, you mean I can't just run down the hall and go right around my salespeople and ask the buyer myself? I actually have to trust my managers that I put in place. So, it was, you were constantly busy with that international job. But as I said, you found a rhythm and you figured out when they were around. I used to love traveling.
You jump over to Paramount, okay? And
Right.
Did they bring you over, or did you go there, or like what was that a specific decision, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I look back on this a lot and I think to myself, man, I should have stayed with Disney. But nevertheless, when I got the international home video job at Disney, my counterpart, who I was head of sales in the 90s, the head of marketing in the 90s at Buena Vista or Disney Home Video, he got the domestic job. I got the international job.
Okay.
And the domestic job was the big job. It was 3 times the size. And it really was designed for someone who knew marketing and knew brand management and stuff like that. I was a sales guy, so international was better for me, and everything was great. But 3 years in, maybe even longer, probably 6 years in, I got leveled. Next thing I know, I was working for him.
Oh.
And of course, my ego got to me.
I would think so, big time.
Yeah, and the other thing that gets to you at that point, I'm there at 25 years. This guy said to me, I'll never forget it. I was interviewing. I told him, I said, let me think about this for the week. They were going to give me the head of domestic sales, head of domestic home video, working for this gentleman. And I said, listen, let me talk to individuals in your domestic group through the course of the next 5 days, and let me get my thoughts together. I'll come back and talk to you. And I went and chatted with him on a Thursday. Let's say I found out on Monday I was being leveled. On Thursday, I went to talk to him, and he had his head of HR with him. And I went in to talk to him, and he said to me, and this is classic Hollywood. He said, Dennis, this gentleman and I, the HR guy, we were just saying that you have such experience and such a name in this industry. You could probably leave tomorrow and get a job, and we'd owe you a lot of money. And at that point, I went, this guy doesn't want me to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, when he
wants me to
when
leave.
he opens with that, it's kind of like,
So I went home that night, and the next morning I went and met with the chairman of the studio, and I said, well, this guy said that you guys would owe me a lot of money. Let's explore that route.
Yeah, where are we on that?
But the truth was, like, when I got leveled, I was distraught.
You became the worldwide president. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I had this my whole career, which I was very fortunate. I went over to Paramount as the international president, so it was a lateral move.
Okay.
Within 3 years, I was the worldwide video guy. And then another year went by, and they gave me in the business of Hollywood, there's a theatrical business, and it all goes in what they call windows. What's the next window? And the next window was video.
Okay.
And the window after that was pay television.
Okay. Yep.
So HBO and Showtime, and each even in that television world, there was the pay version and then the free version. So if you saw a Paramount movie on, UHF, which that'll really date you, UHF.
Oh boy.
But my guys sold there. So there was all these different windows. So shortly after I took over Worldwide Video, if you remember back 2010, 2011, Netflix, which used to be and was at the time a physical video business, was turning into the streaming business.
Yeah.
And digital was taking over the world. So, you could sell video cassettes to Netflix, DVDs to Netflix, or you could sell them as stream.
Okay.
So the businesses were starting to merge together. Certain customers were playing in both parts. And so I pushed that, almost in every meeting I had. And soon enough, I became the head. We renamed it the Home Media Group.
Oh, okay.
So I had every distribution window after theatrical.
Okay.
So I had video, digital, and then all of television around the world.
So obviously the streaming thing has taken over the game. But Netflix, all those guys. What impact did that have on you and or the business as a whole? I mean, because one part of it must have just dried up. I mean, there's Blockbuster. That's gone.
Correct.
You're not going to
Correct.
to pick up videos anymore. So where does that impact you personally?
Well, it's had a gigantic impact. It was a secular change in the business. I went through two big changes in my career there. One was video cassettes to DVD.
Yep.
But that was kind of like a natural change. That was, that one technology's going out, a new technology's coming in. When streaming came on, it decimated the video business. It really took it out. In fact, my last 5 years at Paramount, I took 400 people out of the worldwide organization because I was downsizing.
Wow.
I'll never forget. I got to the 54th floor of the Viacom building in New York City. I was presenting my business for the year, which you did at the media companies.
Sure.
I was about to sit down. The chairman of Viacom, he said, "Dennis, before we start," he says, "what was the size of your segment of business at its peak?" And I said, $3.7 billion. He said, "What are you presenting today?" And I said, $1.7 billion.
That's not a lot. That's less.
And he, of course, said, "Do you need the same amount of people to run a business at half the size?"
No, boss.
I said, "No, boss, I have a plan for you right here." So I was kind of Dr. Death. So it had a dramatic impact on that business. All the video people were, you needed a lot of video salespeople because they were physical calls. When you were selling to Comcast, you needed one person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it took a toll on the business. It took a gigantic business. I bet at the peak, Disney was doing $3 billion a year in video. I bet they do less than $100 million now.
I would think so. And
it all switched over to, and probably wasn't the right thing for the studios it did, but, they were all chasing technology. They were all looking for, and Netflix was kind of, taking over Hollywood and really put a crimp in a lot of the different studios. As I mentioned, there were 6 studios. There's only 4 now.
Really?
Yeah. So, 20th Century Fox got bought by Walt Disney.
Okay.
And got rid of that business.
Uh-huh.
And who's the other one? There's got to be Paramount's on its last leg. But yeah, they really, the business consolidated dramatically with the advent of streaming.
And within that whole, you ended your career, but within all that flushing and closing down, you eventually left the business.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I, candidly, not on my own accord. I had taken 400 people out of the organization. They then said to me, "We want you to license our international business to another studio," which I heard that out loud. But what that meant to me was, you don't want to give me another contract as the worldwide guy, in other words.
Uh-huh.
And sure enough, that was the case. I licensed the business and my contract came up and they said, "Well, we don't need a worldwide guy. In other words, we don't want to pay you for that." And so they didn't pick up my contract. So I found myself at 55, been in a business, my one industry, my whole career.
Yeah.
And it's kind of where your strength is if you spend that time. And, there wasn't a lot of people responding to the 55-year-old resumes, those guys who made too much money and looking to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So
I
quickly realized.
Yeah. You bring it, it's hard. I hired some guys and the hard thing was, when you bring somebody on who's highly qualified and that's not what you're looking for, as a boss, you're sitting there and saying, so am I just going to be fighting with this personality? He's not going to really be listening to me. As much as he wants what I do. And the problem is I want what I do. And that's a big problem.
Well, they tell you that you can't, you're not supposed to look at a resume and essentially figure out who this person is or where they went to school or, things like, you're supposed to be blind. Let's look at a resume. But, I don't know one manager in their whole career that didn't look at a resume and go, "Oh, this is an old guy."
Yeah.
He started working back then. I don't want him.
Exactly. Wait, let me see what at college. 1982? I wasn't born.
And the other thing, I mean, it was great at the time when I was getting these big president titles, but those president titles on that resume did not serve me well.
No, now, yeah, they were like, president? That's me. I don't want him. So now you're 55 and you're out, which must be, again, a real kick in the balls. If you were sitting here and a bunch of young guys or gals are sitting out there and saying, gee, I guess a combination of what propelled you and what advice would you give?
Well, I think what propelled me was the way I was born and raised. We were blue collar kids from Havertown. Yep. We got a chance to go to Malvern Prep.
Yep. You were.
And see how the other, I'll never forget one of our classmates said to me, well, why don't you just fill your tank with gas with a credit card? And I kind of looked at him like, I said, my parents don't even have a credit card. My dad was a milkman. Mm-hmm. He'd come home from the milk truck at 4, 5, 6 in the morning. And you always had a choice in high school. There was me and me and my brothers were all in a row. So you had a choice on Saturday morning, either try to lay in bed as your father yelled at you to get out of bed, or go to the caddy house. And I was like, okay, so we'd go to the caddy house. And I remember standing on the first green at Murrian with 2 bags on my shoulder. And I kept on thinking, what do these guys do for a living? I said, I got to figure this out because, my old man had just gotten off the milk truck and was sleeping. And I think those combinations, I mean, that high school experience I had, caddying at Murray, and I thought to myself, I got to figure out how to do better in life. And I have to, I never want to be without money. Yeah. And I think I was maniacal about it, and I made a nice living, but my kids were raised similar to the way you guys were raised. They had nice things, they had stuff, but they didn't live lavishly. And I just didn't let that. My wife was the same way. So I think that's what propelled me. And if I were to suggest, if I had young kids around, I would say, number one, what you guys should do, and you probably start in high school, because I learned it in high school, which is surround yourself with people who have ambition. Surround yourself with people who want to do more with their life, because that's gonna help propel you along. And then once you get that job, work hard. Intelligence might have got you there, but now working hard. And then lastly, I think if you can find a sponsor, if you could find a mentor in a workplace environment, stay with them. Yep. Don't leave them too quickly or hire too quickly, because it's good to have a sponsor as you go through, especially in these big companies. Yeah. These people guide you and help you. And so kind of, I had many, many chances to go over to Fox or to go to Sony or to go to Warner Brothers, but I had a guy at Disney that moved me to Chicago, and then he moved me to California, and he was a great boss. He was a great mentor of mine. And I just stayed with him the whole time, and it really paid out. Wow. Good. So that would be my advice to kids today.
Well, anyway, thanks so much for coming on, Dennis, and good to catch up with you from our old Havertown days. Go Eagles, go Phillies. I guess no Sixers doubt. And Flyers, but I'm more of a straight up Phillies and Eagles guy. But and of course,
I'm with you on that.
Beating Kansas City was the best day of my life. I think that was the best day of my life.
Well, anyway. I know. Kids today in Philly think that we always win NFL championships.
Oh, no. You ain't lived the nasty stuff yet, kid. But anyway, listen, thanks so much, Dennis, and have a good day.
All right, Mark. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to The Mark Howley Show. If you found this story as intriguing as we did, give us a like, share the episode, and subscribe at The Mark Howley Show. New episodes every other Friday. Adios.